Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to be making some lamb chops with bacon and Brussels sprouts, caramelized carrots and onions, and then a smashed potatoes that are then roasted in the oven with Parmesan and bread in the oven. It's on its second rise now. We made the dough earlier, and then I rolled it out into a nice big rectangle, and then beat up like the white of one egg, spread it all over it, then sprinkled cinnamon and sugar, wrapped it up, put it in for a second rise, and now we're going to bake it for 30 to 45 minutes. So I'm going to pop it on at 350, and that's going to be our dessert. And we've got our water boiling for our potatoes since they're going to take the longest. And we're going to pop these in there. I don't want to splash myself because that water's hot. I'm going to add those in there. And these are just small red and gold potatoes. We're going to have those boil until they're soft and tender and we can smash them. Now let's marinate our lamb chops. So I have, we're doing 2 big packs because we're a pretty big family, and I will say lamb chops have a lot of bone in them. And we're going to put them out here on my baking tray, and we're going to marinate them with Worcestershire sauce, garlic salt, and a little Dash's blend on them. Give them a nice seasoning. If you've never had lamb before, think of like a gamier steak. So it has the lamb chops have the texture of like a steak, but just a slightly gamier flavor to it. It pairs really well, I believe, with sage. Here we go. There's actually a lot of lamb chops in these packs today. Get these out. And we're going to give them Worcestershire sauce, which the acidity in this will help break down the fat and leave for a really tender juicy meat. And what I do is I'm going to pan sear them, and then I'm going to stick them in the oven to finish off. And that just allows them to trap in the moisture and cook until they but not get tough. And then I'm going to sprinkle with garlic salt all over, and a little bit of Mrs. Dash's table blend, which is a salt-free, but it has a whole bunch of different spices in it. It just works really well, I find, with different types of meat. And then we'll flip them over, and we're going to do the exact same on the other side. So again, this is going to be for 7 people, and lamb chops, they have a kind of like a T-bone in the middle of them, so there's not quite a lot of meat on each one. So my kids, typically, my older kids will eat 2, sometimes 3 lamb chops for them, where my smaller ones will eat about 1. And we're just going to drizzle again with some Worcestershire sauce. This is, since we've never really looked at it, it's kind of like a seasoned vinegar. And the acidity in it will help break down the fat and make the meat extra tender. There we go. Nice sprinkling of garlic salt. And we're going to take our Mrs. Dash's blend. Nice. Second, I'm going to wash my hands. And we're going to move this over here. We'll start sauteing them off in just a little bit. And now we're going to prep our bacon for our Brussels sprouts and bacon. And then we'll prep the rest of our vegetables for our caramelized carrots and onions as well. I'm not going to use a full pound of bacon. I'm going to use just a half a pound. So I'm just going to cut it right in half, and then I can save this package for later. And we're just going to do, oh, got one straggler in there. We're going to just do on the bacon into nice pieces. This will allow it to crisp up quickly in the pan, instead of if you did the full strip and then you'd have to break it up. And there we go. So just cutting it through. You could also use, if you had kitchen shears, you could use that to cut the bacon. On my pan to an 8, which is just below high. And we're gonna throw in our bacon so it can start to crisp up. And then I'll give my cutting board a flip, wash my hands. We're not eating any of these vegetables raw, so I just did a quick wash on it. And for our Brussels sprouts, what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut off kind of like the head right here, and then I simply just cut in half and in quarters. So we're just gonna quarter it. This will allow all parts of your Brussels sprouts to get nice flavor from the bacon. That's gonna be all parts of your Brussels sprouts to get nice flavor from the bacon. That's gonna be nice, like bacony taste to it. It's the only way my husband will eat Brussels, like my Brussels sprouts, mainly because they're like bacon sprouts, but they're delicious and really simple to make. Even my kids actually like these. If you've never had a Brussels sprout before, they're, I will say, similar to a cabbage in texture, but not quite. Cabbage is very mellow. Brussels sprouts has a more distinct flavor than a cabbage, but the texture is very similar, and it's part of the same family. There we go. And if you've actually never seen fresh Brussels sprouts, they grow on a stalk with lots of little balls on the outside. They're actually they're very interesting looking. And you harvest the whole stalk. You cut the stalk off and then you cut the balls off. So we're gonna quarter these. And there we go. I hear my bacon sizzling, so I'm going to get out some tongs and break it up and spread it out. I'm using, this is silicone wrap tongs. Silicone is food grade up to 550 degrees heat. I'm using a non-stick pan, and anytime you use a non-stick pan, you want to use a silicone or wooden utensils, otherwise you can scratch it. This is actually a Hexclad. I've had them for over a year now, and I've yet to scratch one, which has been a miracle. They say they're scratch proof, and so far it has held true. Okay, let's finish up chopping up these Brussels sprouts. We had a kind of a busy day today. My son had a basketball game, and they won 49-42, and he got 14 points. I was proud of him for that. He's typically does like the rebounding. And then my daughter had a futsal game, which, if you don't know what a futsal is, it's like soccer played on a basketball court, and you play just like 4v4 with a small goal, and it's just really fast-paced and fun. She played against a boys team, so that was a little tough, but she did great. She got an assist and played well. And now we're home and rushing to make dinner, and hopefully having it done by 8:30 or so. It's always my goal to try to do quick but good meals on weeknights when we have less time. Okay. Get these a nice chop off. If they're smaller, I won't necessarily quarter them. I want them all to be about the same size. There we go. So I've got my Brussels sprouts all prepared. I'm going to put in my skillet over here, this is a stand pan, which is essentially a really thin skillet. I'm going to put some oil in and we're going to start searing off our lamb chops. I'm going to put enough so it doesn't stick to it. But this, I love this pan because it's not as bulky as a cast iron skillet and you don't have to season it, which is something I'm not really... Never really gotten the hand of seasoning a skillet before. I guess it just goes, I'm always wanting to scrub them, and you can't do that with soap or anything like that, so it's very counterintuitive. I wanted to do it. There we go. I'm going to put in my bacon. And we also are going to have our caramelized carrots and onions, so I'm going to chop up one yellow onion. And I'm going to cut it in... kind of long form, and so that it's nice and stringy, which will pair well with the carrots. So not a dice or a chop, but making more like a julienne. So I'm going to cut them in half, and then just cut them this way. So when they break apart, they'll be nice long strips, which we'll saute up and will pair well with the carrots. I love caramelized carrots and onions. Is one of my favorite side dishes I love to make because it's that mix between sweet and savory, and I love that. I'm going to add some olive oil to my pan over here. I'm going to put my heat on to about a 7. And we're going to put these onions in so they can start caramelizing up. And I'm going to give just a nice stir. And I see that my oil is starting to bubble over here. So I'm going to drop in my lamb chops. And I'm probably going to have to do this in 2 batches because I have so many today. You want to make sure your oil is hot enough so that it gives a good sear. Otherwise, when you cook, it will just kind of stick to your pan. Get a little bit more in here. And maybe this time one as well. We're going to cook them off until we have a nice brown crust, then we'll flip. We're not worrying about cooking them all the way through. We'll finish them off in the oven for that, and that way they stay nice and tender and juicy. Give our bacon a good stir. I don't want it to burn. And then I'm just going to toss my carrots. Turn that one up, and now I'm going to prep my carrots. Since these are already pre-peeled carrots, I don't need to peel them, but they are a bit thicker than I want, so I am going to cut them all in half. That way they cook up nice and quickly on my my skillet, and I don't have to wait for so long for them to do it. So essentially we're going to saute and caramelize our onions up until they're nice and golden, and then we'll throw in our carrots and we'll let those cook. And then at the very end, we'll toss in some brown sugar, add a little extra sweetness and a little bit of garlic salt. These are the rainbow carrots, so they have purple, which are, orange is the sweetest. Purple and white are not quite as sweet as an orange carrot, but they do add a very nice pop of color in. I'm going to give my bacon over here a stir. And it looks like we're getting to a nice crisping point. So I'm going to add in my Brussels sprouts. I'm going to turn my heat down just a little bit. And I'm going to pop in my Brussels sprouts that we have quartered. I'm just going to put them straight into, whoa, big pot.
You got a question? What's for dinner?
We are making seared lamb chops with smashed potatoes, caramelized carrots and onions, and bacon and Brussels sprouts. Give it a nice turn. There we go. And then spread it out. And now I think our lamb chops are probably ready to do their first turn. We got a nice crust on each one, which we love. This is going to have all the nice flavors on it. Beautiful. And we're not worrying about cooking all the way through. These are very thick chops. We're really searing off each side, and then they'll finish in the oven. Give it a nice turn. Beautiful. Turn my heat down. We got a lovely sear over there. I'm going to finish prepping my carrots. I'm going to chop all those tops off, and then we're cutting them in half just so they are a little bit thinner. My pot over here is letting me know it is boiling well. And beautiful. If you have one that's thicker, just cut it in fourths. Because ideally you want all of your carrots to be about the same thickness and size. That way they will cook up evenly. There we go. 2 more. And then I'm just going to do a simple chop down the middle on all of them. That way they're just not so long. It will be easier to cook if they're a little bit shorter, simply because I'm using a smaller pan. There we go. So I've got our carrots ready to toss in. And get good stir. Beautiful. And let's check these. Good. We got our next good sear on it. I'll put some of these big ones on while we're waiting. I'm waiting. There we go. Put our little chops in here. I see, for those who came in later, we just doused them with some Worcestershire sauce, and then sprinkled them with garlic salt and Mrs. Dash's table blend. Normally I like to use sage, but we were out of that, so we used Mrs. Dash's table blend instead. And now we're searing them off, and then we'll finish them off in our oven. Beautiful. And do a quick sear on each side of those. And now, perfect. Cooking there, and I'm going to do a quick switch, since my Brussels sprouts don't need as much heat as my carrots will. And we'll turn this up. I'll give this carrots a good thing. We want them to get nice and translucent and start to caramelize, get a nice golden color on them, and then we will add our carrots to them. But what onions and carrots pair really well together because there's natural sugars. Carrots are on both, like naturally come in both carrots and onions. So when you caramelize them and cook them out, it just allows them to heat up really. They just meld really well together. There we go. And then I'm going to check my potatoes here. See how we're going on there. Pull one up. They're tender, about to where we want for our smashing. So I can kind of push a little bit, but they still need a few more minutes to soften up. This is fine. I am going to sprinkle a little bit of garlic salt on my Brussels sprouts and bacon. You don't need much added salt on here because the bacon already is salty and adds a really great flavor. But I do find that they need just a little bit more. The bacon can't do it all, but it does really well for the most part. Okay, let's see if these chops are ready for their turn. Lovely. Beautiful. I just want a nice browning on them. We're not cooking them all the way through. We're going to let the oven do that. That way they'll be nice and tender. There we go. Now that our onions, you can see we're starting to get some caramelization and some browning in them, which is what we want. Give it a good stir. We're going to put in our carrots in just a second. I'm going to bring this right over here. And our carrots, we just, you want them small. If you were using baby carrots, you could just cut those in half if you wanted to. Those would work well as well. Beautiful. And now I'm going to give them a quick toss. That way all of the oil can go around and cover them. And then towards the end, we'll add just a little bit of butter and brown sugar and some garlic salt and kind of let that caramel turn into a little caramel. Oh, I lost the carrot. Very nice. Beautiful. I'm going to prep my space over here because soon we're going to be smashing some potatoes and we'll want a little bit more space to work. And we have in the oven, we have our cinnamon swirl bread, which we made our dough earlier today and we let it rise for about 2 hours. Then I rolled it out into a nice rectangle. Covered it with some beaten egg white and then sprinkled sugar and cinnamon on, and then rolled it up and put it in a low pan, and we let it rise for another hour.
You got a question? Isn't lamb very expensive?
Actually, I find this, for these two, it was, all of this lamb right here was about 40 bucks. So it's actually at Costco, it's really not that expensive when they have the lamb chops. It's kind of comparable to steak. I mean, this is quite a lot of lamb for 40 bucks. So if you were a much smaller family, you could use it'd be like 20 bucks for yours if you were a family of 4. So it's not terribly expensive. It gets expensive around Easter because I think a lot of people do lamb at Easter, and I think then they just increase the prices. And lamb lollies, which are a different cut of the lamb, is a lot more expensive. But lamb roast and lamb chops are not that expensive. And it's just a good, different meat source for us to kind of pop in. Okay, let's look at these searing off. We got some nice searing, so I'm going to put these on my tray. And then we're going to pop this whole tray in the oven. And I have my oven on my air fryer setting at 425. And we're going to pop this in there and let them cook, and they just need to cook for about 5 or...
You got a question? You ever had lamb shanks?
Yes, I've had lamb shanks, and those are really good, especially if you do like a slow cook on them. But they're not as easy to find. Like Costco doesn't always have lamb shanks, but yes, I've done lamb shanks before. My kids' favorites are lamb chops. We're gonna put these in the oven. And lamb lollies. I think it's because you can really season the meat well and it has lots of flavor. So I have this on I'm gonna pop it in here, but then gotta change my wrap around. Had it left in here from before. So I'm gonna actually put this up because we're gonna be putting our smashed potatoes in here. So I'm gonna have these on the bottom. My smashed potatoes are gonna go on top, which we are gonna work on that in just a second. Let me give my carrots a toss. I'm gonna turn down the heat a little now that we've got a nice browning on them. And I'm gonna give our Brussels sprouts and bacon a nice toss as well. We can take this guy out of our way. And then we're gonna drain our potatoes because I have a feeling they're ready. So let's look at them. I'm gonna pop one up and then I'm gonna kind of give it a squeeze with my fork and see if I can smash them. Perfect, that's a good smash. Okay, so turn our water off. Get my pan ready. You want a baking sheet for this. And I'm simply gonna just dump my potatoes into my colander. And then we'll put them out on there and we'll smash them. If you've never tried smashed potatoes, you've got to try them. They're delicious. It's just a great way to change it up. So I'm going to put them right here. I'm going to spread this, change it around, make it a little bit easier for me. And I'm going to put this guy on low. Beautiful. So what I do is the pan that I boil them in, I'm just gonna literally place it on here, but I find sometimes it sticks, so I'm just gonna put a little foil down real quick, that way I can pull that off, and then it won't stick. You can just do it and then scrape off the bottom.
You got a question? Do the kids eat most things?
Yes, they actually do. Our rule is you gotta try it, even if you know you don't like it, you still have to try it every single time. But I think I've never really catered or given them kids meals, so they've gotten used to eating this type of food. And they do have preferences. Like my middle daughter, she hates potatoes. Any form of potato. Won't eat French fries, anything like that. And so they do have their preferences, but they will almost always eat everything. So I've smashed them down like this. That's why I say if you put your aluminum foil or parchment paper, it won't stick. And that's just a good, easy cleanup. And then what we're going to do is, I'm going to toss my carrots real quick. There we go. We are going to cover them with some butter and some Parmesan cheese and some garlic salt. But just so I don't knock my pan over here, I'm going to move it. There we go. So I had some melted butter, which we used on our cinnamon swirl bread. And it's about a half of a stick. And I'm going to just pour it over our potatoes.
Yeah, a question. What are you making?
We are making lamb chops that we pan-seared. These are smashed potatoes that we boiled, we smashed them. I'm going to cover them with garlic salt and some Parmesan cheese, and then we're going to toast them up in our oven on the air fryer setting. So it just kind of gives you that mixed like crispiness of an oven fried potato, but also the mash of it. They're really lovely, and they're super simple to make. And then sprinkling them with some Parmesan cheese. You could use cheddar cheese if you want. I find Parmesan cheese as more of a family favorite. We're going to pop these in with our lamb chops. And these will just, I have my air fryer setting set to 425, and that will just help the cheese melt and crisp them up. You don't need much. There's our lamb chops. We had seared them off in the pan, and now we are going to finish cooking them in the oven. That way they remain nice and tender and juicy. If you try to cook them through on a frying pan, they'll get really dry. Same with like pork. Pork can get really dry if you try to cook it through. So when I make my pork chops, I also finish them off in the oven. And then here we have tri-colored carrots. So I've got, these are purple carrots. They're not black. Those are purple, white, and yellow carrots that we are cooking there. Now I'm gonna add the rest of this butter over here, and then we're going to add a little bit of garlic salt and brown sugar. And this, I'm adding the butter to it. I know we used oil, but in the beginning, this is going to work with the brown sugar and make a very nice kind of caramelized glaze on our carrots. And you don't need a lot of sugar. I'm using maybe, I would say like 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. You don't need much. And then a little bit of garlic salt. This adds the savory and makes it just lovely. And then I'm going to give it a nice turn. And with the onions in here, they're kind of caramelized up, and they're just going to be a lovely sweet and savory.
Now, you
flavor.
typically use garlic salt over regular salt. Are there instances in when you prefer regular salt?
Yes. So baking, of course, I always use regular salt. And then depending on like certain like flavor profiles that I'm cooking with, I'll use a regular salt. So if garlic doesn't necessarily go with it, for instance, like sometimes I'm doing a breaded fish, I'll use either regular salt or sometimes I use Lowry's seasoned salt with that because I'm going with a different flavor profile. So if garlic isn't going to be my star of my show or go well with it, then I will use a regular salt with it. And then over here we've got our Brussels sprouts and bacon. And we just quartered them. We cooked up the bacon and we quartered them and we're cooking it in the grease. They're pretty much done. So I'm gonna turn these guys off. And when I toss the little bit of garlic salt in there to give some, I find that garlic salt gives more flavor but less sodium because it's the garlic juices that have been rehydrated with the salt, and it just gives more flavor, but I use a lot less than if I'm using salt. And here you can see we've got a nice caramelization happening with that butter and the brown sugar for our caramelized onions and carrots. And now I'm gonna get some trivets out and we're gonna get ready to pull the rest out of the oven because dinner is almost done. Let me clear off some area over here. That way we have space. You know, they always say you can put your food, your hot stuff down on a quartz countertop or granite. I'm always afraid. I've never done it and I'm like, won't do it. I'm afraid I'm gonna shatter it. Okay, let's get some trivets. These are just a cork ones and a wood one. And we're ready to pull out our lamb chops and our potatoes. Okay, beautiful. We've got a nice bubble and melt on our potatoes, which is what we want. And here is our lamb chops. And this does weigh like 10 pounds, but at Costco, the lamb chops are such a great price. And for a large family, it is perfect. I'm gonna look at my cinnamon swirl bread. And I think, let me get here, I'm gonna pull this, it is ready too. So this is our cinnamon swirl bread that we made earlier. We made the dough earlier and it's popped out. It's gonna have like a cinnamon roll, a nice beautiful swirl all the way through. Well, I'll put this down and I can put it right on top of there. Let's plate up and I'll show you how we will be eating our dinner tonight. Or at least how I will serve it up. Some of my kids will have, they'll pick around. So I love Brussels sprouts and bacon. So we'll have a nice Brussels sprouts and bacon. Our lovely caramelized carrots and onions. They have just a wonderful flavor. And we've got our lamb chop. And a nice serving of smashed potatoes. And this is what we're having for dinner tonight. Delicious, easy. I think we got this out in about 30 minutes or so, give or take. But quick and easy, great food on a busy night. Thanks for joining us here tonight. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We try to do live shows for you guys every single day. We post the full videos later on the link on our website. You can check that out. But again, thanks for joining us today and don't forget to like and subscribe.